distinguished former President of Ghana, President Mahama, Honorable Minister, Minister Mutati from Zambia, distinguished governors, panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to officially open this important side event on creative energy solutions to boost African agriculture. A particular warm welcome to our distinguished panelists who have considerable first-hand experience in this space to provide valuable insights. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the most important challenges Africa is facing today is the lack of access to energy. Today, over 600 million Africans do not have access to electricity, and 700 million Africans do not have access to clean cooking energy. Access to sustainable energy services is, however, not an end in itself, but rather a critical development enabler for Africa. Availability of modern energy services is essential in life, especially for the development of Africa's agriculture sector. The Africa Progress Panel latest report, Lights Power Action, Electrifying Africa, launched in March in Abidjan by former UN SG, Mr. Kofi Annan, and President Adesina, rightly stipulated that energy access is essential to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goals will not be achieved worldwide if we do not achieve them in Africa. The availability of modern energy services is one of the key aspects to improve rural productivity and rural development. Allowing water pumping, processing and conservation of agriculture output, transportation to local markets, boosting revenue for farmers and communities. It is therefore no coincidence that the first two high fives of the bank are to light up and empower Africa and to feed Africa. These two sectors are closely interlinked. Energy is powering agriculture, and productive agriculture is making rural energy investments viable. To address Africa's energy challenge, the ADB has launched the New Deal on Energy for Africa that has the ambition to achieve universal access to energy by 2025. This means that we have to install an additional 160 gigawatt of capacity to the grid, connect 130 million households via the grid, but also importantly, connect 75 million households via off-grid solutions. Like in India, there should be no villages without electricity in Africa. This is the mandate of the bank. The continent has a unique opportunity to leapfrog towards off-grid solutions and underscores the importance of bringing off-grid market to scale. Indeed, a dynamic set of businesses has emerged in Africa that is increasing energy access across Africa faster, more cheaply, and more widely than conventional grid extensions. This is driven by innovative business models and rapidly decreasing technology cost. These technological innovations, including new appliances for productive use, such as solar-powered water pumps, do not only have the potential to fundamentally change the way energy access is being provided, but also how agricultural development is taking place. However, several challenges need to be addressed if we are to achieve and scale up to 75 million off-grid households by 2025. This includes the fact that, for example, 80% of all solar home system sales in Africa happen in Eastern Africa. We need to move this towards West Africa, Central, and all the parts of Africa that needs this. Moreover, the cost of solar home systems in many cases are only afforded by the middle class in rural areas rather than by the bottom of the pyramids. This is why the African Development Bank launched the Off-Grid Revolution in March of this year, bringing together more than 150 stakeholders, including the leaders in the off-grid space. The Off-Grid Revolution workshop that we organized identified a key number of priorities, including country-level intervention by the bank, working with the governments to support the generation of clear plans, off-grid versus on-grid plans, policy reforms, developing institutional capacity to source off-grid providers at scale, mobilizing public and private financing for large-scale rollout of off-grid technologies into remote parts of the countries. Company-level intervention, which requires innovative financing solutions, including large-scale funding in local currency to mitigate the FX risk. Industry-level intervention as well, focused on working with the industry associations to improve industry self-regulations and harmonize credit assessment metrics. We believe that such a combination of intervention and contributions from all stakeholders could reduce the cost of solar home system by more than 50%, which would make them affordable to millions of rural Africans. We would specifically require that governments also commit to providing fiscal and tax incentives to reduce the cost of these home solar systems. Let me briefly highlight some current AFDB's activities in the area of decentralized energy access solutions. We are developing a pipeline of dedicated financial instruments, including the Off-Grid Energy Access Fund, which we will seed with $100 million with structured credit facilities to address the local debt financing gap. We will also set up a fund of $400 million, which actually has been already approved by the bank last year, to facilitate the energy access inclusion that will offer concessionary long-term debt focused on small-scale grid-connected IPPs and mini-grids. We are working on country support packages in the off-grid space with the aim of launching the first set of investment program by the end of 2017. We are also working with the industry players on an electricity access incubator that would help train off-grid entrepreneurs and support research and development of technologies for productive use. On the mini-grid side, we launched a market development program addressing various barriers to the scaling up of mini-grid. Today's session will zoom in on the innovations of the off-grid space, notably in the area of productive uses that can support the transformation of Africa's agriculture, and discuss what is required from AFDB, from government, from other DFIs, from industry players, from civil society to scale up. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no doubt that the future belongs to Africa. By 2050, Africa will have the same population as China and India today, with rising consumer demand from a growing middle class. The cities will be booming, and the number of urban areas with population of more than 5 million people will rise. Addressing the closely linked challenges of access to energy and food will be key to ensuring that this future will be a prosperous one. This requires a truly transformative partnership of all stakeholders: governments, development partners, the private sector, and civil society, to work jointly to light up and empower Africa, to feed Africa. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to hearing from our panelists on how we can make this happen, and also hearing from our distinguished guest, former President Mahama, also Minister Mutati, and other guests attending this event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for setting the scene for us.
Thank you.
Big words, revolutions, aggressivity, ambitious program. We'll make sure with our panelists we can live up to your expectation. But I can see that the bank is extremely aggressive with some very ambitious targets. So hopefully for the next hour and a half, we're able to find out how we can innovate. Now, this is the time I invite on stage our panel members for a conversation which I hope to be extremely dynamic. But we're going to innovate. We're not going to just limit ourselves to the panelists. We'll do something we call an open mic. At some point, there's some great ideas in the room, some great suggestions. And to make sure we open the microphone so anybody can take the mic and say whatever they have to say. How many times have you gone to a panel, to a conference? You get some great ideas, but you never get a chance to get a mic. Now, this is your time to get your mic and then say what you have to say, suggestion as long as innovative. So a big round of applause. Welcome on stage our panelists to come and talk to me. Thank you. Yes. Thank you. Okay. So as they settle it, there's free seating. Huh? Don't mind the audience. See wherever you want. Let me start with Daviti. You and I had a great conversation yesterday about innovation and off-grid. You heard the African Development Bank scaling up. What do you expect from them? How do we make sure that all over Africa, off-grid really becomes sort of a way of life, particularly in the rural area? So how do we innovate in this sector? What is that we can do differently from what we've done so far?
This has been a long wait.
David, can you get the microphone?
Yeah.
There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Good. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. I would like to start by congratulating the FDB and the VP for taking a leadership role in the off-grid space. This has been long. We've been waiting for this a long time as entrepreneurs and high-tech and startup companies. We need this financial leadership in the space in order to scale. And I think we are all here to talk about scale. This industry of off-grid is young. It did tremendously well as a startup industry in the last 3-4 years in East Africa and West Africa. And now is the time to grow. I think that we all understand here in the room that off-grid has a much better time to market if you compare it to any power station. So an average time to build a power station would be 9 years. That's a World Bank statistics. And compare it with off-grid systems that can be manufactured and deployed in less than 6 months. This is a real revolution, and this is why the FDB calls this a revolution. And in order to grow to the next step, we have a role in bring in a lot of foreign investments and new investments to scale up financing for off-grid so we can take it to millions of houses, to millions of small businesses. And this is the revolution I'm talking about. 75 million means that we need to bring in billions of dollars to fund this revolution, and these billions are needed now. So we need to start working on bringing in, foreign investors, private money, and grow this business to become as big as on-grid power stations is. And because think about it, what is the difference between bringing power from a central power station and then building a grid versus I bring the power station to your house immediately, so you don't need a grid? That's the real innovation. That's why we are much faster to deploy. And very much, like telecom, when Africa started telecom 15 years ago, people said, no, it's not going to work. No, people don't have money. They will not know how to use the phone, etc. And they were skeptical. And look, people who put money on T-Mobile US 15 years ago lost their money. People who put money in MTN, made a lot of money. And this is the message I would like to send as an industry to the team here and beyond, is put your money in the next revolution, which is the off-grid revolution.
Well, David, my question was very precise about innovation.
Yeah.
What is the problem? Is it the problem? Money, obviously, is required. What else do we need to do differently to innovate in the way we look at off-grid to make it more cool, as we talked about agriculture earlier?
So I think about three things when I think about innovation. One is innovation around distribution. How do you reach 600 million people? It's a lot of people. And the way we look at this is let's partner. Let's partner with mobile operators and make sure that we use and leverage that distribution system of the operator, which already has a reach to millions of people. So that's one innovation that's already taking place in Nigeria today, where we operate with MTN. We have a nationwide reach across Nigeria using the MTN stores. And that's doable in other countries as well, and that's what we plan to do. The second innovation is how do you pay, right? And some countries have mobile money, and they use mobile money to pay for this, which is one innovation that's we are leveraging. But other countries like Nigeria and Ethiopia and others do not have mobile money. What we did is we innovated around airtime. So we enable people to pay for their electricity via airtime. Anyone has airtime. Anyone can buy airtime in the street. It's very accessible. So this is the second innovation that we bring. And the third innovation is really installation. How do you design a system that's easy to install, that you don't need a technician, and you can train anyone in the village, any carpenter, any handyman, within a few hours he knows how to do that, and then he can make money, and people are happy to pay him a small amount to install the system, or they can choose to install it themselves. So these are the three areas where I feel there's really innovation.
So three precise areas where you can innovate to make this more accessible and scaled up. Now, Jesse, let me come to you. I know you're doing some wonderful stuff in Kenya, and I'll come back to you, Max, and the USAID to give you a general perspective. What is that, just along the same lines, what I asked Daviti? How do we innovate well, so that this thing can be scaled up and reach out the whole continent? Good microphone.
Is this mic on? It is? Yeah? Okay, great. Well, at the risk of repeating some of the things Daviti said, and I know we're pressed for time, so I'll be brief, but firstly, I do want to emphasize the leading role that the African Development Bank is taking on off-grid. It's truly refreshing, remarkable. If I could share an anecdote, when the Vice President of Energy visited us in Nairobi a couple months ago, Nairobi traffic, for those of you who know it well, can delay the arrival of people at certain meetings. This was no different. But given a short time period that we had left, the vice president, who was in a hurry, I think, to get somewhere else, said, you know what, this is too important, and asked his team to extend so that they could spend a good couple of hours with us at MCOPA. And that was a real message to me, to our team, and I think to the industry, about the seriousness with which the Vice President, the President of the African Development Bank, and this institution is putting their effort into this space. So it is not lip service, it's very serious, and I commend that sort of bold action. It's absolutely what the continent needs to electrify quickly and satisfy the big five that you articulated earlier. So thank you for the invitation to be here. I also want to compliment for a minute, if I can, our industry, Davidi's company, my company, and others who are making great gains with off-grid electrification in a hurry. We have, as MCOPA, based in Kenya but selling in 4 different markets, that's Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Ghana, over the last 4.5 years reached over 500,000 homes. And I believe as a sector, we're now well over 1 million homes using some form of affordable pay-as-you-go electricity off-grid as it is. And I think we are now past the baby footsteps, past the entrepreneurial phase, and the question is how can we scale this up quickly to 75 million homes in the next decade? I would offer 2 quick remarks. The first is that we do need innovation, and the one I would sort of echo the same ones that my colleague mentioned, but I would also say innovation in DC or low-powered appliances. That's already happened very quickly, and in MCOPA's case, a few years ago, we couldn't find a television that we found affordable for our low-income customers. The majority of our customers are farmers, the majority of them live on smallholder plots, and the majority of them can only afford 50 cents per day to buy not only the energy but also the appliances to go with it. But in the space of 2 or 3 years, the ability for a television to be powered off of a very small amount of solar, in this case about 10 watts of electricity, it requires a panel smaller than this this table in front of me, that has made solar-powered television affordable. And we are now selling more than 1,000 solar-powered televisions every single week. And I can see the same coming into refrigeration. I can see it coming into fans and cooling. And I can certainly see it coming into agricultural equipment. The need from the stakeholders in this room, it particularly pertains to policy, and to encourage the R&D and the innovation to continue for low-powered appliances that can run elegantly and efficiently off of solar.
Right. We'll come back to that question about how do we use off-grid to boost agriculture across the continent. But I just wanted to focus on the issue of innovation. And going on, Your Highness, Princess Abzeta, if I can just refer to you like that. And going back to Burkina Faso, which I know you're doing some wonderful stuff there. In addition to what has been said so far, tell us a bit more in terms of how do we innovate, how do we actually work better in the off-grid?
Hello, that's what. Good afternoon, everyone, Your Excellency, mon frère Amadou, and my other brothers also was here. Many thanks for already what you're doing on the field. Innovation is key, indeed. But as I used to say that we need to create also design our own product that will fit our climate. And that's why I bring this, not just to make advertisement for myself, but it's what I design. I'm an engineer by profession. And it's taken me 2 years to design this and to test it all through with all our climates in the Nordics, and it's also near by the sea. It changes. Our people, as you say, they can afford. Even 15 cents or 10 cents sometimes is even too high. And for me, the innovative idea here is always to link energy to productive use. If I bring a service, that service also shouldn't be a cost, an additional cost, but it should also raise the revenues of the people. The initiative Marmalade for Sustainable Energy that I've launched has been recognized by the United Nations 2015 General Assembly as a breakthrough solution. Why? That because it's inclusive, it's green, and is linked to the ecosystem. We're talking about those big agendas, what doesn't mean anything for our people on the countryside. Our people, they're green by nature. They used to produce energy. The innovative idea is that they got a great idea to send us to school, to learn things and come back to change their lives. But it means that with the biomass, it's part of energy, not just the solar. Using the harvest waste to make the biogas that will reduce, as you know, for the health of my mothers in the countryside, that you know that 4.5 million people dying every year for indoor pollutions. It's also bring access to gas, then they can cook safely. It's reduce the pressure on the forest. And also, we need to think, and that is the policy, I'm not the policy makers here, we need to assess systematically what we are doing to bring it on the INDCs. The informal sector also are the game changer within the renewable energy. How do we bring them also as a game in the market, because it's important. The big companies, they got access to finance. The informal sector, they're doing great. More than 40% in some countries, and the GDPs. How do we bring them? How do you, the bank, bring us on board? We have some solutions that I developed that I'm ready to share with the bank because we're here to find a solution and to bring it at scale. Right. That's what we're doing in Burkina Faso. And our target is to train. We didn't talk a lot about vocational training. Vocational training is very important. You need to install, maintain good. It's very key because without us, we can't get anywhere. It's very important. Our target, training of trainer 5,000 per country, and also electrify off-grid solutions. And that's how we bring those people out of poverty as well, because it's business. Don't forget that. It's business as well.
Excellent. It's very laudable, the fact that you have an engineering degree and be able to design something adaptable to your people in Burkina Faso. That's also about innovating and making sure your skills are actually useful to your people in Burkina Faso. I just want to recognize that. Now, Max, I'm going to come back to you because you have a broader perspective from the energy panel. You're looking at Africa as a whole and listening to industry specialists. If you're talking about innovation, what do we need to do to actually scale up off-grid across the continent from your own perspective?
Thank you. I'm not a technician, as you know, and I'm not really looking...
I figured out much, Max.
My name is Max Jarrett. I work with Mr. Kofi Annan in Geneva on the Africa Progress Panel. Just to add, for me, the key thing is we need innovation in mindset and an innovation in leadership. Leadership must take a holistic approach to this. When you talk about agriculture, we talk about the rural sector, we talk about off-grid, we are not talking about the other. Let's be clear about that. It's not that we're doing a favor or it's a privilege. That is Africa. My sister, the princess, mentioned the informal sector. In many parts of Africa, the informal sector is the economy. It is the real economy. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about empowering our real economy. We have to innovate our mindset and change the mindset. If we want to transform Africa, we've got to really think in a new way, holistic way about that. Last year in Lusaka, the ADB annual meetings, we had, there was a session just like this, focused on energy, and we produced this report for that. I mean, Amadou mentioned our report that was launched in Abidjan this year, Lights, Power, Action, but the key thing I want to stress as we put an innovative approach and mindset to Africa is the opportunity. I'm tired hearing about poverty and hearing about the challenges. Yes, they're there, but there's so much opportunity on our continent. And the thing is that in some areas, innovations are already happening, and we see things are moving. But I travel around Africa with Mr. Annan, and we speak to many leaders. Why is it that we were just in Abidjan launching the Lights, Power, Action report. we went to see the Vice President, Kablan Duncan. In our report, we referenced the good things that are happening in Cote d'Ivoire. I'm from Monrovia, Liberia. Why can it be happening in Cote d'Ivoire and not be happening in Liberia? Now, I'm not criticizing the leadership of my country, but I'm saying that if something's happening in one place, we can innovate in mindset.
Why is that?
Well, I cannot speak to the government of Liberia and why it's not moving as fast.
What's your take?
My take is that we should see what the best practice is immediately in our neighborhood and try and apply those best practices. As a Pan-Africanist, I don't see my country as being just a moi. We are part of a wider community. So that mindset also is one of fraternity, brotherhood, and so forth, and how we move forward. I was talking to the princess about what's happening in Burkina Faso and saying, I want to connect her with people in Liberia. The same things that she's doing, it's applicable in Liberia, but it needs a mindset to move forward. So the first point for me is really leadership and innovation in how we approach the situation.
Excellent. You actually touched one of the high five of the African Development Bank, which is integration. So maybe we can integrate our country actually to the energy sector by making sure what works in Burkina Faso can be exported to other countries. Let me come to you, Cheryl. You represent the USAID from Washington, certainly bringing a different perspective of a bilateral, listening to what these people have said so far. What is that the USAID is doing in supporting innovation in off-grid?
But let me take a little bit of a different angle. As a development partner, certainly the U.S. government recognized that the lack of access to reliable energy was a major constraint to growth and development in Africa, along with the African Development Bank and many other partners. And not to mention the constraint it presents to the more than 600 million people who don't have access to electricity in their lives, their health, their education, their livelihoods. So we made a commitment in 2013, we called it Power Africa, and one of our first and most important partners was African Development Bank. And our commitment is to double access to electricity and to add 30,000 megawatts and 60 million new connections by 2030. And we took kind of a different approach and really tried to have a private sector focus and address the constraints to investments in energy. And yes, grid connections are very important, but we realized that off-grid solutions were going to have to be a very important part, too, of our Power Africa initiative. And African Development Bank has been a really good partner for us. So, and there's been some progress. Obviously, a lot of new technologies and costs have been coming down, but still a lot of constraints. So one of the approaches that we took was to do competitive challenges. So there are a lot of players out there, some smaller players, some new entrants in the industry, and alongside of African Development Bank, the UK, Shell, and some others, we did the Scaling Off-Grid Energy Grand Challenge for Development, and that was one way that we offered an opportunity to provide our support so that some of the smaller players in off-grid could join in. I think we've seen that support to companies in Zambia, Ghana, Uganda, Nigeria, in just the first 6 months of the challenge have added as many as 10,000 new connections the first 6 months. So we've had a couple of other similar challenges and competitions, something called the Global Leap Awards, which is specifically for refrigeration solutions in off-grid space, as well as something we called Powering Agriculture, another grand challenge for development specifically to look at power solutions in agriculture.
Right. Excellent. Let me then, now that we talked about innovation, let's get back to the topic, which is really how do we use off-grid to actually boost agriculture, not only agriculture, but also other productive sectors. So David, let me start with you. What do we need to do differently to make sure that it can become a real revolution whereby off-grid can actually be used to boost agriculture across the continent? Let's get your microphone next to you.
Does this work?
Good.
Okay. Thank you. So, when we look at agriculture, I see 3 areas where, off-grid power can really help agricultural scale. And I think, this is really the game right now in Africa is how do we make agri scale? First is light, It's about work being done after dark. And, we have customers in Nigeria today who have chicken farms, and they need to do work after dark, and they don't have a solution for light, as simple as that. It's about sorting, it's about packaging, it's about a lot of this work that if you do it during the day, you're just spending your time instead of being in the field. The other is irrigation systems. So in order to scale up agriculture, you need automation, you need sensors, you need metering. All these machines need power. And off-grid solutions can really power, all these different systems. And third is really the microclimate control systems. So if you look at growing crops in a controlled way, you need sensors, you need sprayers, you need insect traps and cooling systems, etc. And all these can be supported by off-grid. And finally, there are the IT and management systems. So computerizing the management of agriculture. And I think that if you look at how agriculture was done here and how India and China as well grew their capacity is really by computerizing and introducing a lot of new technologies into agriculture, and all these technologies obviously need power.
Excellent. So there's tremendous opportunity for agriculture regarding off-grid. So Marx, very quickly, what do we need to do to raise off-grid to boost agriculture across the continent?
What do we need to do?
Right.
Please repeat the question.
What do we need to do differently? Now we've innovated.
Yes.
We're going to use off-grid to actually boost agriculture
Yes.
across the continent. Anything in particular we need to do to be able to actually boost agriculture?
Well, at the risk of sounding cheeky, off-grid is not the other. Agriculture is not the other. We're talking about power. So that power source is going to be used for everything. It's storage, it's cooling, it's everything. We've got to get the mindset, this is not the other. Just the same way that you want to power an industry, a processing plant in the urban sector, you need to do it in the rural sector. But now you're off-grid. That's all. That's the only difference.
Right.
That's the only difference. It is not the other. We should move away from this being an NGO thing, a little project thing there. No. Off-grid is power. It's energy. It's just that it's not on the grid.
Got you.
And we use it for everything. Everything that we need to do to transform this continent. Because we waited too long for the average African to be at a state where he or she wants to be, having everything they need and having all the power they need to realize their full potential. So it's not the other. We need power to transform. Let's get the power to everyone now.
All right, so it doesn't matter whether it's off-grid or on-grid, as long as you have access to power. All right, so just quickly, boosting agriculture using off-grid. Anything you want to say on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add that off-grid power, in the way it's being deployed, at least by our company and others at the moment, is also creating extensive credit scores for customers. And how this gets back to farming is that it so happens that the wide majority of our customers are smallholder farmers. And it so happens that the majority of smallholder farmers do not have good and steady access to credit and other financial services. So in our case, 500,000 homes, we know that 70% of them earn a significant part of their income from smallholder farming. We also know that the wide majority of them don't have access to formal banking services or even microfinance services. Now, when they start to buy a solar home system, and let me put it into the sort of framework of one farmer. When one farmer gets a hold of a solar home system like an M-COPA system, they stop spending 50 cents a day on energy.
Right.
Kerosene, batteries, phone charging, etc. And for a period of about 1 year, they will send that money to a company like M-COPA to then buy a solar power system that gives them better power at the same price. The magic happens after that 1 year. After that 1 year, I don't have to spend my 50 cents on my energy anymore because I bought a solar panel and I bought some appliances that give me a more modern home.
Right.
But I still have that 50 cents a day that I used to be spending, and now I can put that towards other productive use.
Right.
We are now actively in the business of providing farmers with inputs. Off the back of a good credit score, they can borrow from M-COPA to get a bag of fertilizer or to get high quality seeds and get other things that typically for our customers are very difficult to afford. Shelling out $20, $50, $100 in one go is very difficult. And so on the back of a good credit history with MCOPA and in exchange for remortgaging effectively the solar for 50 cents a day for the next 6 months, they can get a hold of the inputs that they need to then have a more productive smallholder farm.
Excellent. Now, Your Highness, let me come back to you. So, off-grid and boosting agriculture across the continent, what's your views on that?
For me, I think we need to, where we want to go to. What is the result that we want for our people? I think there's enough energy to be able to get access to market. We don't talk enough about access to market. The demand is there. Ourselves, as Africans, we are a huge market. I think we need also to focus on the plenary. This morning we're saying that billions are imported. It's time to start processing and also design, but I'm technical, I'm sorry about that, but we need to design the kind of power that we need to deliver and bring energy to another scale. We're talking about scaling up. We cannot scale without putting money, without taking the risk. I'm sorry. The banks also, you need to take at some point the risk to the bottom. That's the point, because if I have the money right now, I'm able to put off-grid to 2.5 million household system in Africa. You have it, but you need, who's going to take the first loss? The bank need also to put something in the basket for that. That's really important.
Right.
I think that is, and new technology is there about, no, I cannot say that to him, but we need to, you make me lose my apropos.
Right,
it's not good, Amadou. Because you see the bank, the moment you ask them money to take the risk, they turn your attention. That's what he's doing. So you won't get me. You won't get me. I go back again.
We'll get back to the banks. Basically, how we put more money so you can scale up and reach as many households as possible.
Yes.
All right.
But I didn't finish yet.
Okay. Well, let's go back to then off-grid and agriculture. I think that's what you're getting at.
Yeah, but I think technology, but we need irrigation. We already have the technologies. We don't need to start from scratch.
Right.
For instance, just a concrete example in the village of Douaba in Burkina Faso that we have done, totally powered by solar power plants. The ladies, the moment that they release time with their hard work on pounding the meal and all the things, and also for the shea butter, they say, you cannot do something else for us that we can also use the water out raining season. So then I put the solar power plant, solar pumps in there. So their revenue increased, and they even didn't want to go to Ouagadougou. Right. Then you see that we touch also the issue of immigration. If we bring that ecosystem, if we also make it cool, and even I make the disco also for the youth. But let's be honest, that's what the Excellency was saying. If we want to fix them on the countryside, youth are youth, they need to dance. Yes, of course. Yeah, they need to have fun. That's important. And that also you can be female and do techniques and wear high heels. That's why also, those are the things we need to market, to make it sexy, to make agriculture sexy. That's why you fix your youth and your women on the countryside and make it easier. And what Excellency said, I want to bring it here again. Yesterday you said something very important, which is the technical center services. This is really very key. And the banks really need to invest massively on that. Solutions are there. We don't need to start from scratch. What he has done, he said, I use solutions that didn't work out. You in Burkina Faso, please don't start there. I thank you so much. And those are the things that we need to go to. Amadou, please bring the money up there.
Right, absolutely. Let's get in there. I think, Amadou, you heard the message loud and clear. Because if you want off-grid to be cool, you need to give me some money. But so let me just finish with your USAID. Now going back to then connecting off-grid and agriculture, what is that we need to do more of that? What is that we need to innovate to make sure we can boost the agriculture in Africa?
Okay, I think my colleagues here have made a lot of really good points. I would say that Off-grid solutions are needed all along the value chain in agriculture. I can guarantee you there are multiple conversations going on in this conference right this moment about post-harvest losses. And how do we solve that? Off-grid solutions are really important there. All kinds of opportunities. And if we can treat off-grid solutions as businesses, that's how they're going to be sustainable. So thinking about what can we do to help with financing, access to capital, access to markets, how to run a business, I think that's going to be really important. And then to change the topic a little bit, but something that's important, as development partners, there are a lot of solutions around the world, and we shouldn't have to reinvent the wheel everywhere. There are a lot of good, very local solutions that are very appropriate for where the innovations are taking place. But I just learned today, for example, of an Indian company called Promethean that came up under one of the challenges that I mentioned, and they have a battery power solution for dairy refrigeration. Right. So these kinds of solutions, I think that we need to also make sure that we are sharing that kind of information in a way that allows businesses to thrive.
Excellent. Cheryl, I'm going to borrow your microphone and go down there and go to the Minister of Finance of Zambia and get his perspective before I come to the President to hear his views about what we heard so far. You're going to use the exactly, okay, Mr. Minister, let me just help you out. There you go. Honorable Minister, you heard a lot about innovation, about boosting agriculture. I'm sure you have some perspective and views with regard to Zambia. Would you like to share with us?
Thank you, Moderator, and Your Excellency, former President. For me, I think innovation is about changing lives, and that is what is important. It doesn't matter how you do it, but provided you change lives. I'll share with you 3 aspects on how we can move as Africa, as Zambia forward. One is an issue which was raised about mindset. 2 are structural and policy issues around government. And then 3 is the shape and structure of investment. Doesn't matter whether it's in energy or elsewhere. You need to have clarity. Now, mindset issues. One example, when I was a member of parliament, we took solar to my constituency. And the question which was asked was that, yes, you have brought us solar. When are you going to bring power? And because the understanding of power was on-grid, hydro-generated. So the politician then answered that when we have capacity, we shall be able to bring power. So you have mindset at the end and mindset with the politician.
Absolutely.
So you need to deal with mindset issues, because the odd habit is that you pull the power hundreds of kilometers only to deliver half a megawatt. When are you going to create access to energy if you are going to have expensive connections? So when you're connecting, you are leaving a lot of people in between. 2 is that we have a conversation, productive conversation as Africans. Conversation and then delayed in terms of implementation. It's not that we don't know. We actually know what is to be done. But it's the reluctance to implement, and you only implement because there's a sense of urgency. When we had the power deficit last 2 years, because we had 50% out of generation, then all that books were dusted up to try and create an urgent solution to the power deficit. And you know what that happens? Is that the solution you're creating because you're doing it urgently is expensive. Right. And then somebody must pay for it. And yet, for years and years, we knew that we needed to invest in order to deal with a growing economy. Now we have a challenge. There's a sense of, urgency. So we create a problem. Then, around mindset, is that there are certain things that you can touch, others you don't touch. So all along we have known that you cannot deliver power at a tariff that is unsustainable. Short-term, yes, not perpetually. So you are carrying and possessed with this unsustainable level of tariff because one, like my president will tell you, it helps to get re-elected. But that is a moment's process because longer term, you are actually eroding your opportunity to move forward.
Absolutely.
So we must be able to face just politicians and say, no, what matters is not for me to go across a line, but to continue to have stamina to deliver and change lives. Right. So tariffs become critically important as motivators for investment. The second major point, structural and policy reforms. Right. When we couldn't contain the subsidy as Zambia, we took the courage because we just won the elections last year, August. So it was time now to take those hard decisions because we had political capital, and this is reality. When you take the hard decision is when you have political capital. So we did not remove the subsidy, which is what everybody says, is that we transferred the subsidy to inject it in productive sectors of the economy, such as education, health, which had suffered because we are giving subsidy to a wrong, component. So we then made the rational decision. Away with subsidy. We are now, courtesy of the World Bank, doing a cost of service study so that we can have a sustainable tariff which motivates, investment. We think that is important. Again, on the policy side, you can't have investment if you don't have transparency and quality in a sector like the energy sector. Even if you're doing solar. So for solar, we have said we needed to have a refit program. Basically, at what tariff level do you deliver if you're using solar as an energy source compared to hydro? Because you've got to be realistic that these two things are different. You can't bring in the private sector and say, invest in solar, compete with hydro. No, it doesn't happen that way. So we have a refit, which creates a gap between the tariff under hydro and the tariff under solar. And cutters of KFW, they are taking the fat between. So initially, just to motivate, this is what we call innovation, to motivate investment. Right. Next, under policy is the grid code. If you're going to have major investment, particularly in hydro, you've got to be sure that at the end of the day, that power is sold. Now, your typical structure is that you have a utility in between and an investor. So you force a state utility to buy and competitively from this IPP because the state enterprise hasn't got a soul, so it can take and consume inefficiency because that's what it's made for. Okay. But we're saying that, no, you can actually sell to the ultimate consumer, which is a grid code, transparency by way of transmitting power and tariffs. That is what we're calling innovation. And the third point, investment. We were in Batoka with the vice president from African Development Bank, looking at a mega investment, Batoka Gorge, 2,400 megawatts, properly packaged, with consultants from Europe and all these places, because you see, Africans, we must not be shy. that you cannot attract sensible investment if it's not properly packaged. We always are talking about potential. We have water. Yes, everybody has water, but can you translate it into how it can be quantified to produce power in a way that is measurable? So we had to pay real money to create proper feasibility, to create a proper bankable document. So when we opened up this investor conference, over 300 investors from all over the world came because it was properly done. 2,400 megawatts, level of tariff, 3.6 cents per kilowatt, bright stuff. That is what we're calling innovation. Innovation is about to do things correctly and properly. There's no magic about it. You're just using words. Do it properly, then you're going to attract investment. When we did solar, scaling up solar, 100 megawatts, rules transparent. Everything else properly done. We had bids of over 180 bidding for 100 megawatts of solar. And ask me the tariff, 6.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Because you're doing it properly. And the very last point, which we discussed with the bank, is that for a long time now, Africans have been bystanders. So you develop the Batoka Gorge. So you have these European types and others coming to invest. And then we are saying we are poor. We are helpless. It's because of the investment model that we have done that there must be those who invest, and our role is bystander and to be able to receive. No, we have got to turn it around. Right. So we have said, for Batoka, the locals must take part of the action. They must own it. Find us a financing structure model that takes into account participation of the local people. We are tired to see Africans always observing. You're not going to reduce poverty if you're an observer. And the majority of us have been observing. And that's why we have specialized in condemning and pointing fingers. It's because we are in the grandstand. We are not in the field of play. So what we are telling you as politicians is that innovation is change. The mindset of all of us as Africans, and Zambians included, that never again should we see the water pass. Let's do something about it. And you know the biggest risk is not take a chance. Thank you.
Thank you. Very powerful messages about change of mindset. Thank you very much for your contribution. And I'd like to welcome on stage the former president of Ghana to give us his views of what he heard so far about innovation. And he's been extremely innovative in Ghana, so Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Let me thank your panelists for a very insightful discussion. I'll just be brief because I know you're pressed for time, and just raise a few points that I think that other countries that are following, should be mindful of so that they don't make the same mistakes that we made. In Ghana, we came up with the Rural Electrification Program and the Self-Help Electrification Program. And under that program, governments undertook to extend the electricity grid to all parts of the country. And rural communities and other small peri-urban communities could invest in transmission poles and pool the grid a certain number of kilometers. I think it was 21 kilometers, not further than 21 kilometers from the transmission. And so based on that, we have reached electricity access of almost 76% of population have access. It has been a very costly exercise. If we had to do it again, I'm sure we would have done it differently. You see the transmission grid crisscross the whole country. Very expensive. It's been done with a lot of money. But I see that for many of these communities, off-grid solutions would have been much preferable, because as we transition from hydro, Ghana has had very good hydro assets for a very long time. And so power has been very cheap in Ghana for a very long time. But as the economy has grown and demand has continued to grow, we've had to supplement with thermal generation. And thermal, of course, is more expensive. And so if you have to recover the full tariff, then it means that small rural communities and peri-urban communities lose out because they cannot afford that tariff. And so increasingly we're seeing villages where almost everybody's light has been cut because they can't afford to pay the tariff from the electricity provided by the national grid. And so we have started to put in off-grid solar solutions for communities that are beyond the 21-kilometer mark that I talked about. And so small solar systems, to power a whole community and giving them prepaid meters to be able to pay their bills, or using mobile money is catching up. And so using mobile money to pay their bills is becoming fashionable. Not as widely spread as in East Africa, but I think that increasingly off-grid solar solutions are picking up. And like you said, MCOPA has started doing some work in Ghana, and we hope that that will scale up. Right. Solar solutions time has come. I remember as recently as 2011 when we called for bids to put in solar into the national grid. We were getting rates like 22 cents per kilowatt hour. Today, we're seeing prices like 7 cents, 8 cents, and so it means that it becomes more realistic that we can use more solar in our systems than we have done in the past. The major problem with energy is efficiency of collection of revenue. We have a big gap in Ghana. We're working with the United States. We signed the Millennium Challenge Compact to improve efficiency of revenue collection, because the company that does the last mile, the interfaces with the customer, is the Electricity Company of Ghana. It's a state enterprise. And you know the problems involved with state enterprises at that level. In some of the cases, the persons who are supposed to be collecting the bills are conniving with the consumer and making them, steal power in exchange for, some little consideration. And so one of the things we did was to agree under the MCC that we're going to privatize, customer services and billing and revenue collection. And that was one of my Waterloos. They threatened to switch off the whole grid, the electricity company workers, and there were strange blackouts before the election and all that kind of thing. And eventually I lost the election. But my advice is we shouldn't give up. The point is, as long as we're not collecting the revenue sufficiently, you cannot have a sustainable power system. And so it's my hope that the government that has taken over will continue from where we left off and improve the entire power transmission system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. President, for your contribution. And thank you for showing that there's a connection between off-grid and presidential elections in Africa. I thought it was a sector that's very cool. You can boost the energy, but now we know that it's connected to the presidential elections on the continent. So it's a very cool sector. Now let's now open the microphone to get some feedback from the audience. And if you can keep it as short as possible so we can get our panelists to answer your questions. Can we get a microphone just to go around? If I can borrow your mic. Yeah, there we go. If you could just state your name, your organization, and by all means keep it short so we can get many questions.
Vivek Mithil from Millennium Resources in London. Part developer of projects, part advisor and consultant. Very, very great speeches over here. I'll make a comment really and ask for feedback on that. Having financed a lot of projects all over the world, there are 4 things really that come together to make innovative ideas work. And there's capital, there's policy, technology, and a fair price for electricity, the commodity side. I'll give you an example, and it'll be good to see whether this can be implemented in Africa. We're in India right now, The Indian government figured out, from a policy point of view, that there are 27 million pumps working in irrigation, water pumps working in irrigation across the country. They use somewhere around $6 billion of diesel. About 40% of those pumps are connected, are powered by diesel. And there's a program now rolling out for solar water pumps. But there are lots of implementational issues over there. When I travel, I'm doing things in Zambia, in some of the other African countries. There isn't a recognition, I find, of that. On the finance side, Mobisol and M-Copa have actually done a great thing in terms of helping bringing credit to people we never thought could get credit. So that innovation will speak for a long time beyond off-grid. But the question is, how do we see those sort of innovations in policy? What can we take from other countries like India? How do we translate policy, finance innovations across to Africa?
Excellent. Thank you for your contribution. Another question. Christopher Mark here, just in front. Christopher.
Christopher Marks from MUFG. Two innovation suggestions. I see there are two vice presidents here from energy and agriculture at the AFTB. Could we put perhaps a committed percentage of investment into agriculture that is only solar or renewable supported as a commitment to support the ideas such as the gentleman mentioned? Second question relates to the grid. It's not as sexy as the generation activities here, smart grid investments, batteries. Should that not also be a priority on the AFTB side? Harder to do, but presumably critical.
All right. Any other questions? There you go. Here, there's a microphone.
I want to make a point.
Can you wait for the mic so we can translate?
I'm nervous. I'm not used to speaking.
You nervous?
So my name is Anna Maria, and 12 and a half years ago, I started a company named PowerStorm, and it was meant to empower women who want to work in the emerging markets or with the emerging markets and to focus on the telecom areas. So 68% of our sales are in Africa, and I think 70% of these 68% are working with Francophone countries and off-grid. We've been selling spare parts and systems mainly to the Francophone communities, meaning the telecom operators. And I agree with everybody who mentioned that innovation is already there, and from my point of view and where I'm working, we need to empower the mobile operators because they are the ones who are going off-grid, and especially in my area, which is the Francophone again area, last year we quoted 120 million euros worth of telecom spares, expansion communication systems, and solar and hybrid powers that got qualified and then rejected due to lack of finance. So I just want to make the point that there are companies out there in the Francophone areas that need to have help so they can also afford maintaining and expanding their systems and therefore affecting agriculture and many other areas in the rural off-grid.
Excellent. Thank you very much for your contribution. We'll get one last question here. Go back to the panel.
I'm Sanjay Prasad. I'm Principal Secretary Agriculture in the state of Gujarat. Now we are introducing a system where the solar pumps are being connected to the grid. We have experimented in a few villages and now we are coming out with a policy. So the people, they can use the solar energy to energize their pumps, but pumps are not required throughout the year depending on the cropping cycle. The rest of the time the energy generated through the solar panels will be fed into the grid. And we found that in our work in some of the villages that substantial amount of money can be earned by the farmers through solar farming. So photosynthesis and photovoltaic, we are combining them with a photo farming agriculture policy, and it will be an additional source of income to the farmers. So one of the issues said was about the small farmers getting a good source of income and economizing. So they'll earn money through the solar panels and the solar pumps. Thank you.
Excellent. It's a very good question. Number one was the question, I see some hands raised on the left side. All right, let's summarize the four questions. Can I come back to you? Sorry, yeah, that's the second round. So there's a question about what does it take to make off-grid actually work on the continent? And I think that's something we'll come back to. Is it a policy or financing issues? There was a question about the agriculture vice presidency as well as the energy vice president. How do you work together to make sure in some of the investment you make in agriculture at least to make a commitment that some of us likely will have to come from off-grid generation. And there was also a suggestion about how do we make actually this battery sort of more sustainable so that at least they can contribute to make it off-grid much more cool and sexy. Those are your own words, Christopher. And there was this question about how do we actually empower the telecom companies, because eventually we just don't innovate on off-grid, we also have to innovate on the telecom companies. And last but not least, how off-grid could be used to actually generate income for the communities across the continent. Now, before I get into you, let me just go to Vice President. You got a question there. You've been challenged there by Christopher, who knows a little bit about the African Development Bank. How do you work with your colleague, for example, in making sure? Can I get you a microphone here so you can make a comment? First of all, is your colleague in the room in agriculture?
I think Jennifer is not around. Jennifer Blanque is the VP for Agriculture.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. She's not here, yeah. You know, basically we work very well together. As you know, my vice presidency is also in charge of green growth and climate change. And the director of green growth and climate change is here, Anthony Nyong. So Anthony actually looks for financing, climate finance, across all the sectors, including actually agriculture. So this is one. And number two, what we can think about is to maybe dedicate part of the investments in irrigation infrastructure, maybe to the solar water pumping system maybe. I know there is an Indian company that is exposing something here that is really cool, exhibition here. I think it's $400, you can have a whole system that can allow you to drill all the way to 150, I think to even 300 meters. And that will cost you only $4,000. And it provides 300 watts of power. And these are the kind of things we need to invest in also for Africa. And I understand the Prime Minister Modi is very actually keen to deploy that also in Africa.
Right. Yeah. Mr. Vice President, let me challenge you a little bit, because you heard from one of the panelists saying that if you give me this amount of money, I can give you this amount of access of household across the continent. And I know your ambition is to get over 200 million for the next 10, 20 years, with 75 million actually going to off-grid. What exactly is the bank doing in terms of providing financing for that to happen?
At various levels. First of all, with the companies, we provide lines of credits directly to the companies that are investing in off-grid in Africa, but typically at scale if it is a direct investment of the bank. We also provide guarantees to those companies so that they can raise money on the local market. That is very important because the revenue is in local currency, so it is important to match it with funding in local currency. However, for small transactions, we have set up this fund for energy inclusion. Total is $500 million, with 100 for off-grid and 400 for the small IPPs, meaning projects that require funding of less than $30 million can be funded through that fund. And so the team is here. I think Anthony is here. We have Astrid and Usainu Nakulima, who are 3 directors focused. Actually, most of them do these days renewable energy, even if you're also investing in thermal power as well. One point I wanted to make, Sheikh, if you allow.
Go ahead.
The former president mentioned actually the links between elections and electricity. I really want to echo that, as actually President Adesina said this year in Davos. If you want to stay in power, you must provide power. And I think that's quite cool.
I've got a little great quotes here about presidential elections. Well, we took note of your directors and make sure that get locked, the room is locked so they don't leave here before Your Highness like to talk to them during the break. Let me then turn back to you, to the panel. You got a couple of great questions there about what does it take to make it work. And I know you talked about it earlier, but maybe if you could take, Jarek, let's start with you, Max. Let's start with you. What does it take to make it work? I know you're going to repeat yourself, but let's underscore that message loud and clear.
Well, the message is that we have to basically change our mindsets.
Right.
Off-grid is not the other.
Right.
It is absolutely key. I'm mindful of the conversations I've had with Strike Masiwa and Mo Ibrahim, who are some of the most innovative investors and entrepreneurs on the continent in telecoms. Similar conversations were taking place not 17 years ago, but 20 years ago, where going from mobile telephony to landline and the whole issue of, we can't roll out the landlines. And the mindset was, no, these phones are only for certain people, and we don't know, whether if we invest in this, it's going to be a take-up. The demand was there. It was even bigger than they thought. And the things that the cell phone brought for us were so much more than even those entrepreneurs imagined. It's going to be the same with the off-grid. So let's just take it as a key component of what we need to do. Gotcha. The investment in the off-grid must be just as central as the investment in the grid. The grid still needs to be there, but the off-grid must be seen as part of the discussion, a holistic approach. So I've repeated myself. I'm not a broken record, though, and I'm just repeating I'm on message. Off-grid is not the other. We've got to basically pour in as much more investment in this to scale it up so that really it can do what we need it to do for our people.
Absolutely. Repetition is good as long as it's a good message. So, WT, I see you shaking your hands. You have a deal already with him?
Already done.
Tell me, what does it take to make it work?
First, one of the questions were referring to the company names here on the stage, so let me clarify. So Jesse is from MCOPA, and I'm Davidi from Lumos. You mentioned Mobisol, so they're not here today. So I want to really pinpoint one area, which is the macroeconomic environment. Because we talked about financing, I think it's clear for us that this is an emerging market. Yeah. And when you start a new industry, there is an important role for the government. And the role is really to enable the business environment and remove barriers. Because, if you want to create a critical mass, if you really want to reach 600 million people in Africa, you need to be attractive as a country, as a continent, because there is competition out there. I mean, other countries like India, like Southeast Asian countries, are bringing in a lot of incentives to really promote renewable energy and make sure that, us as entrepreneurs, we are attracted to these markets. So looking at the global picture, okay, I think there is an important role for, governments across Africa to say, we want you to come here first. We want you to invest in Africa. And in order to do that, we are willing to remove the barriers. And these barriers can be, duties, okay? So for example, zero duty on renewable energy is something that will help investors who say, okay, I'm willing to put, more money into Africa. And these areas could be foreign exchange, access to foreign exchange, because, a lot of these investments are coming as debt. For example, as Lumos, we raised $50 million from OPIC, which is the US government as part of the Power Africa project. And we are very proud of that. But eventually, these are US dollars, loans that need to be returned in US dollars. And as you said, the revenues are coming in local currency. So these kind of, solutions, and I'm calling here for, a discussion between, the private sector and the governments to really pinpoint the 3-4 areas that are key for scale.
Excellent. Thank you, David. Max,
just
very
a small,
quickly.
double-hander. While I fully agree with what he said, and I endorse what he said, and the fact that we need investment, we should not make the mistake we made with telecoms. We should ensure that Africans have a key role to play also in the application, the development, the R&D of the technology that we have. There should be African companies also having a say in this and a big play in this. We should not, it's great that you're on the continent. We want you on the continent working with us, but we want Africans also as part of the game. That has to happen. Because in telecoms, we don't know how many of the handsets are actually made in Africa, or even the software and so forth. So please, we cannot make that mistake with off-grid.
Wait, we need to empower the local private sector. Now, just quickly about empowering the telecom company. Any comment you want to make on that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, the irony right now is we're trying to bring more and more of our manufacturing into Kenya, but we're being blocked by policy. It's cheaper to bring in appliances from China than it is to be able to assemble products in Kenya. So I 100% agree with the miss that's happened in mobile telecoms, and it does not need to happen again. But we need policymakers to be forward-thinking. And if I could offer to the Vice President a high five for off-grid, okay? You have your high five for the AFTB. I think there's a high five that needs to happen now within off-grid. Firstly, all governments need to recognize that off-grid is not the other. It's part of the broader picture. And we were both actually in Durban the other week for WEF Africa, and the number of people from the grid community saying, please, we need off-grid, because in fact, if we're challenged as the grid companies to have to connect very low-income customers at a loss for a long time, then we're in a fight with the president over what we can charge, and everybody's in a tough situation. So recognizing off-grid is an elegant solution is step one. Number two has been mentioned, but we need to also recognize the role of digital payments, whether that's mobile money or airtime or other. Digital payments are the bedrock of what has enabled off-grid energy to flourish. Number three in the high five is then we need to remove taxation, okay, for DC solar-powered appliances, and that also includes the taxation related to assembly and manufacturing locally. We just have arcane rules. Those need to be changed, and we can really make progress. Fourthly, we need to enable local currency, whether that's through guarantees or other mechanisms. But as Davide has said, local currency is the business with which you collect money from customers, and that needs to be the financing with which companies are built, not Forex with all that risk. And fifth, we need to look at subsidy for a level playing field. And I don't, our business and our industry so far has been built on a private sector basis without subsidy. But it's frustrating to be connecting people for a very affordable price and then watching the grid be subsidized sometimes at $1,500 per rural connection, while these elegant, more environmental and faster growing solutions are getting no support. So I think balancing subsidies so that it's a fair marketplace, that's how we'll reach 75 million homes.
Right. Mr. Vice President, can you convey the message to the President there is now high five within the high five? So each of the high five will have their own high five, and I think that's what we just find out from Jess. Your Highness, any comments on what has been said, or that you've already been covered?
Just one point. Yeah. Just one point regarding, I agree, we are here also. I have been advocating that the international coal proposal, 30% at least should be allocated to the local companies and also bring in the informal sector, who's really the engine of our economy. That I totally agree. Off-grid is not competing on grid. Both are needed because we are all tomorrow producers. That's how I see it. And there's no more an argument for me by saying that we Africans, we're not bankable, we don't have bank accounts. For me, if you got a mobile phone or a SIM card, you have a bank account. I think also that we need to think out of the box and take advantage on the new technologies and the telco. And another thing that we didn't talk about that is an idea, for instance, the big infrastructure of solar power plants, you also can link it, put part, if you think that we're too small, you can bring also, we can include the small projects within the big projects. Right. In Burkina Faso, I'm a renewable energy ambassador on energy efficiency. What we have done, and what I've done good, is that now in Burkina Faso, we don't, everybody can produce energy and sell it free, okay? And as well, we want to produce locally, because if we want to go at scale and we're not able to assemble locally, we won't make it. Right. We will work for transport companies, and we will export our additional value jobs. And again, to make it sexy for our youth on the countryside, you need to value the job, make sure that they really have a good living. And it's possible. Having 200,000 CFA per month in the countryside is possible. Right. That's what I want to add.
Thank you. Maybe this is the time, unless, Cheryl, you want to add something, we can actually begin to conclude before we have the open mic. Anything else you want to add to what's been said so far? All right. Well, let's just try to get some powerful messages here from each of you. And I'll start with David T. Do you have a microphone? And I'll come back to the comments in the back there when we open the mic for more comments. I mean, David, a lot has been said. Innovation, mindset. If there's one message you want to get across with regard to off-grid and in boosting not only agriculture, but also other sectors on the continent, what will be that message?
Thank you. So my message is that off-grid is not the other. Off-grid is the solution. We can really deploy it rapidly in the next 3 to 5 years, and we can reach 75 million new connections with off-grid in the next 5 years. I believe this is doable. I believe that we have a very big mission, both governments, the FDB and the other DFIs in the space, as well as the private financial industry, to create a new revolution, very similar to what telecom has done in Africa 15 years ago. I think this can be repeatable, and we can really change the energy space in Africa forever and make Africa the leader in this new solar energy space, really showing the world that Africa is adapting new technologies faster than other continents, because Africa can really lead the change. The need is there, and the solution is there, and I'm sure we can make it happen together. And I want to thank the FDB for taking the leadership. I think these are great news for the industry.
Max, what will be your message?
My message would be the same message that Mr. Allen gave when we launched the report in Abidjan. And he said, we know what is needed to reduce and ultimately eliminate Africa's energy deficit. Now we must focus on implementation. The time for excuses is over. It's time for action.
Lovely. That's a good message. Jess, what will be your message?
I would just echo that I think this train is off and running. That this is definitely now happening at 1 million homes and more in terms of off-grid electrification. The real question is, as Africa has hosted and born this new industry, will it continue to lead that industry? And it takes leadership in policy making to then fund the investment, to then fund the companies that will reach those consumers with better sources of energy. It's definitely happening. It definitely will happen in the long term. Let's hope it, with the right policies, can happen in the short term.
Fantastic. Jesse, thank you. Your Highness, what will be your message?
Implementation, Implementation. I think this implementation,
Right.
and money on the table. Take the risk. We already there. We already take the risk. So come with us and trust your people. At the end of the day, and this is the mother who's talking to you, as the sisters talking to you. The parents take the risk to send us to school again. We are able. Indeed, we don't have the assets that the banks need internationally, the financial market, but trust us. Even also for the international world to trust also the African Development Bank, our local banks, and try to go together around the table and look deeply regarding the currencies.
Right. Thank you. Cheryl, what will be your message?
From the perspective of a development partner, there are many partners in this space. Governments, private sector, businesses, others, and that's good. And it's a very exciting time for off-grid. Lots of opportunities. I think President Mahama reminded us, though, that when it comes to policy and decision-making for governments and for businesses, it can be very treacherous. And there are many opportunities, many challenges, and they keep changing up in this space. So I would say that I would encourage the African Development Bank to play a coordination role and a leading role with all the different partners. We really do look to the African Development Bank to keep us all coordinated and not to waste our effort and our energy, to make sure we keep learning from our mistakes and to keep us all on our toes.
All right. What's great messages, which we can summarize as, DVD, your message is making sure that off-grid is not seen as just on the side, but something like the mainstream. And we need to come together to make sure we can have the off-grid revolution that we all deserve on the continent. Second message, implementation, implementation, implementation. As you mentioned earlier, which is really, we're tired of just conceptualizing and not executing. And Jesse, your message about the train has left the station. The African government have to show some leadership so we can begin to lead when it comes to off-grid. And Your Highness, your message about we have to start taking some risk by providing finances so we can all come together to really be able to provide what is needed to make the Africa works. Last but not least, the leadership to the African Development Bank to continue to lead us, to coordinate and make sure we all come together. And on that, I'm going to ask the message from the Vice President as well. But before that, Mr. Vice President, we have to give a round of applause to the panelists for a job well done. So you guys stay there. We'll get the message from the Vice President, and I'll get maybe one comment from the back. Mr. Vice President, you want a mic? All right. I'll tell you what, why don't you come forward so we can see you there?
Yeah, first of all, to thank all the panelists, of course, President Mahama as well, and Minister Mutati. Just one message. As Cheryl said, the bank sees that partnership is a cornerstone way of achieving these ambitious objectives. That is why, within my vice presidency, President Adesina has created a full department focused on partnership. We have a director with a team of 8-9 people focused on coordinating, making sure that the governments in Africa are not confused with all the initiatives that have been launched by many partners around the world. We need to speak with one voice and collaborate and work together. Number 2 message, this is the last one, Sheikh, I promise.
Take your time.
The bank actually has a new strong team to really boost energy access and structure transactions, leverage the bank's money, leverage government transactions, donors transactions, and invite the private sector to invest massively in the energy space. Right. We have a team now of 60 people, will be 100 people by end of this year, based in Abidjan, but also based in the 5 regions of Africa. We are also decentralizing. The way you are decentralizing energy, we are also decentralizing our team so that we can be closer to our people, actually. 4 out of the 5 directors comes purely from the private sector. As a vice president also, I come from the private sector. This is to say that private sector involvement, private sector money is extremely important. What's important also is that both public operations and private sector operations are under one roof. This is not the model where private sector team of the bank is fighting the public sector team of the bank. We want to leverage public money to raise massively private money to invest in you and invest in people of Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think it's really, this is the kind of conversation that gets some of us extremely passionate, because I had a privilege in the previous life to be the permanent secretary of energy of Senegal. And energy is something I'm extremely passionate about. And it's a sector that, as we all know, all over the continent, we lose about 2 to 3% of our GDP because of energy problems. So regardless of what we do in other sector, if we can't fix it, we can't be the emerging economy we want to be. And I think more importantly, we cannot achieve one of the high 5, which is really to improve the lives of our people, being urban or rural across the country. This is one sector we need to fix, and we need to fix it now. The good news, if you look at people behind us, we get a technological solution, we get the financing solution, we get the smart people who can put it together. If we get the commitment politically, I believe that next year, wherever we meet, we talk about how many people have access to electricity across the continent, but more importantly, how many people have improved their life through income-generating activity because of electricity. So on that note, I'd like to thank you all. Unfortunately, we can't have our open mic, which would have been good, Mr. Vice President. Should we have the open mic? We're running out of time, huh? I think we're running out of time, so we're just gonna leave it that way. I heard 2 hands. You had something to say quickly? All right. Sounds like something very important, so I'll give you the microphone. Say it. Go ahead.
When we are talking about transforming agriculture, we have made an innovation wherein in any island, remote area of Africa where you do not have access to grid, there we put up solar greenhouses, right, wherein the roof of the greenhouse is mounted with PV panels. So roof is going to earn, and also the land below the PV panels is going to earn out of high-tech agriculture through hydroponics or soil-based drip irrigation. So that when I supply this energy, say for 5 megawatt, around 3 kilometers radius, then 6,000 acres will be converted, dry land will be converted into wetland, and nearly 1,000 farmers will be benefited. Excellent. Or we can supply 450 pumps, solar pumps. So maintenance will be done in that solar greenhouse. We create 55 jobs. So This is really inclusive growth. Off-grid, I'm talking about mini-grid. Right. What happens is, if you supply a solar pump to somebody, after 7 years, nobody is going to maintain it because inverter is going to fail. So to avoid all these things, this solar greenhouse rooftop system, it creates 55 local jobs for the people. They can do the operation and maintenance. Excellent. They can also install we can help them to install during that.
Thank you.
And we can also give them energy for 450 pumps so that around 1,000 people around that project area, they can also use the energy. And that financial model, we can work it out. Even government can invest in that. That will be much cheaper. So this becomes inclusive growth so that lots of people will be benefited. So this we call it, I have signed a MOU with Rajasthan government and Gujarat government. And if any of your country is interested, I can sign MOU with your country. After all, we have to put money into the hands of the local people. Energy and money, energy security, food security, because this is agriculture.
Thank you.
We have to improve. We have to improve the skill of farming, because when we do drip irrigation and hydroponics and all that, surrounding farmers, they are also educated and their quality of life also improves. This kind of projects are needed for Africa, and if you are interested, we can sign a MOU with that.
Thank you for your contribution. I suggest that you reach out to the Director of Green Growth and Climate and Renewable of the African Development Bank. You can have a B2B and a bilateral discussion to see how we can take it forward. You've been raising your hands for a while. It seems extremely important. Let me give you a microphone here. We don't want to lose any great ideas, so any suggestion? And after that, that's it.
I've really learned so much. I work for Bank of Industry in Nigeria, and we have done something wonderful on the solar space in collaboration with UNDP. Because the question has always been, as my friend Haroya Hannes have been saying, is finance, finance, finance. Why would banks not lend money for everything, but they're not lending for solar energy? It's simple. Because of the fact that issues of tariff, because we know that the cost of power from the grid is generally cheaper on economies of scale. That's number one, outside the issues of state subsidies. And so when you do off-grid, the tariff will be very high. Commercial banks will not even dare get there at all because they don't have, because of the long gestation period involved in financing such solar power. Now, so what we do, we were able to get that done. We have for 15-year tenure for over 3,000 communities. With the grant, we had a grant from UNDP. Then we brought our own money on, we did a matching fund, 50-50. And with the pilot scheme, it has gone well. Now we want to upscale it now on a commercial basis. And that commercial basis will not involve a grant. Now the issue is now, how do you sustain that without a grant? Because it means that the cost will be very high, and if the tenure will not be long enough, you can't recover your money. Right. So that's, I'm glad about what the ADB is doing. My request to them is, as they partner with development banks all over all Africa on this project, let them help us to mitigate the issue of exchange rates. Right. That way, if we get dollars and we can be able to hedge it, then since the tariff is in local currency, then we can be comfortable to lend money to as many solar projects as possible.
We have to wrap it up.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your contribution. I'd like to obviously end by recognizing a very important man in the room, the former president of the African Development Bank, Baba Kanjai. I will ask you to just give a round of applause. Thank you, the microphone. Mr. Vice President, I can't not give you the microphone. Just say a few words as a closing remark.
Very, I could say very embarrassing because I was not thinking of...
I'm so used to embarrassing him. Every time I have him in the panel, I have to give him the microphone.
No,
so, Mr. President.
I came in a position when I was even a young professional in the bank, right? Very young professional in the bank. My thing was to see how we can transport energy here from Africa even to Italy through Inga. to generate Inga Dam, to make it a fantastic project. Africa could not use the quantity of energy at that time, 1970s. But today it's possible to use it. It's even possible to commercialize it. So talking of grade, it reminds me of people giving more emphasis on microcredit and leaving aside big credit, big loans. But both are necessary as financing development. And actually, the microcredit will go to the small and the inclusive financing, the same way that the off-grid will do. But we should not put aside these big infrastructure projects which can actually consolidate the power production of Africa, and the big one can help to finance the project which can afford it. The Inga Dam kind of thing, or the project of Guinea, or the river basin, are very good, but those will be good for big projects. But what we need here is really to come to the point which I understood here today. I have been very well educated by the different interventions. In grade, off grade, you have to find a way to work together to put energy to the people in Africa. 600 million people out of electricity. Mr. Vice President, I will ask you, please, it's over 10 years. You have to make a plan and to look for the implementation every year, how many people have got this electricity. So the off-grid can give electricity in the house, but to empower countries, to empower cities, you need the big project also to be implemented. So it's important that every year, we are said next year, where we have been able to use the off-grid, we have made so many investment and energy in many houses. As the Prime Minister today was saying that in his country, maybe next year or 2 years from now, there will be electricity in every rural area. We have to be able to say that in every 5 years or 2 years, even every year, we have so many houses which have got electricity because of the lead of the African Development Bank. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And now you understand why I always give him the microphone, because he's a wise man. Thank you very much. And that brings us to the end of our panel. Again, it's been delightful to be your moderator, and I hope we all learned something. I did learn a lot from this. And the African Development Bank, particularly the complex of the Vice President, has taken note of all the great ideas that came out from here, which will be shared, obviously, with the President, but more importantly, in reaching out to the people behind me and making sure some of the great ideas come out here don't get lost, so we can give access to our people across the continent and improve the lives of the Africans. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for being patient. Thank you.